I'm your host, Kelly Morgan, indie author and indie publisher. Welcome to another episode of The Author's Mic. Welcome to today's episode. Hey, you guys, welcome to another episode of The Author's Mic. This is Kelly, indie author, indie publisher, and you know it's Monday because I have a guest. I want to welcome Dr. Berry with me. She is an author. She's written a wonderful book called The Culturally Competent Educator, and she's going to tell us all about it. And Dr. Berry, thank you so much for being a part of The Author's Mic. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
So tell me about the book. And I always like to ask people about their journey because most people who have written a book some don't even know they were going to write the book. Some it didn't start out being a book. But then they arrive at this place in their life where they did write this book. And so I'm interested in number one, how did you become an author? And then why this topic?
I became an author by accident, is probably the easiest way to say it. I was initially the first book I wrote. I was actually working on my master's degree and presenting at conferences, as we in education and academia do, talking about language for culturally and linguistically diverse learners, which includes children who speak African American English or Chicano English, but aren't typically included in language instruction in K-12 education. And I was approached by someone after the session, which was still one of the most memorable sessions I ever had. I love it when it's packed to the gills and people are sitting on the floor because I know I've hit a topic that someone wants to hear about. And they came up afterwards and they said, "We'd really like to see you put this into a book." And they introduced themselves. And I said, "Oh, okay, thank you." And I did something with that card and never saw it again. Went to the next conference I was scheduled to speak at, and again, these people came afterwards and said, "We really, really would like to see you put this content into a book." This happened 4 conferences in a row. And I finally sort of looked up and I said, "I guess you're trying to tell me something." Speaking to God directly, right? So it's like, you only have to hit me with a brick upside the head once or twice before I get it. So I did contact them. And that became the first book, which was Affecting Change or Interventions for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Learners. Years go by, COVID hits. I'm a little bit bored because I can't work in schools like I used to. And speaking with the publisher, they said it'd be a good time for us to do maybe a little revision, clean up, bring this book current, because by then it was close to 10 years old. And I thought, good project, and it ended up being about an 85% rewrite. And so the second book, Affecting Change for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Learners, was born. And then shortly after that, once again, speaking at a conference, the same thing. Someone comes up afterwards and says, "Dr. Berry," by then I had finished my doctorate, "we would really like to see you put this into a book." And so thus was born The Culturally Competent Educator, the right book at the right time because of what our country is going through and what our children are experiencing in schools and classrooms around the United States and abroad. I do get international book sales. They've asked for licensing in different languages. So I know that this is something that touches people around the world, even though we might not notice it.
So explain to someone who doesn't really understand, what do you mean by African American English? Because I know when you first said that, I instantly went to Ebonics, but you said no, it's not Ebonics, or even Chicano English. Like what is that?
Right. So linguistic systems are that. We tend to say languages. And when we say the word languages, we think Spanish, Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, a world language that we've been taught comes from a specific country. But within the United States are all these, some creolizations of English. Some people want to call them vernaculars. I and others don't like to use the term vernacular when it comes to African American English because that word vernacular is rooted in street culture.
Mm.
And our language as African Americans, our language is rich and it is deep and it goes much further than the street. It actually links all the way back to Africa, the motherland, where we have brought words and phrases and food items and maintained a syntax of language that is rooted in the linguistic systems, the many linguistic systems we had, tribal languages that we brought with us, but were removed from us in the process of slavery or during enslavement. So that African American English is about word choice. It's about the pattern we use. It's about even our body language when we're speaking to one another, things that don't need to be said but are clearly understood, right? Yeah, that right there.
That
For
one,
those
yeah.
people who are listening and can't see that, there is something that's going on physically between the two of us. Those things are all part of a linguistic system. And it doesn't matter. And I think for me, one of the big light bulb moments for me and understanding this many years ago was recognizing that it didn't matter if someone came from, a Black person came from Canada, East Coast US, West Coast US. I'm a California girl. From the deep South, Midwest, there were these things that we said that were exactly the same, that are not rooted in school English or what some people call proper English. And I started to wonder, how is this possible? And it is because it is a linguistic system that is rooted so far back that we don't have memory of the root, but we are still the branches, the leaves of that tree in the language that we speak. Chicano English, very much the same thing. Rooted in the Spanish from Mexico, that many Chicanos have brought with them, or their ancestors brought with them, primarily in California, New Mexico, Arizona, and into Texas, but very, very heavily in California. But it is a creolization, more or less, of Spanish that is distinct and unique, and still, like African American English, has this syntax and body language and all these other aspects of language embedded in it that make it a unique system of language.
And so, with this being said, and some people might say, well, give me, I know what you mean, but I'm
Mhm.
curious. Give me an example of a mannerism besides the look that is rooted throughout all Black folks, as you say.
Um, our mannerisms are really in our body language, and it's hard to reproduce something like that for people that are just listening to this as a podcast. But one of the things that probably most easily recognized are certain phonemes, letter sounds or sounds. So in Black English or African American English, we tend to make the sound for the letters TH. Instead of saying with, in African American English, we say with an F, like an F sound. Instead of those same two letters at the beginning of a word, this or the, we tend to say dis, right? Duh. And it is not because we cannot read TH. When we're reading and articulating what we are reading, we pronounce the letters as they're written. When we are speaking, it's different because African American English is a spoken language, not a written language, although it can be encoded. It can be written down based on the sounds that are spoken, but it's not how we've learned or carried that language through. It's oral.
You had told me, because I had told you that growing up in Salt Lake City, learning to speak very proper English, the King's
Mhm.
English, and then learning, I guess, African American English. You said that I was bilingual, which
Mhm.
is almost the same as you said as code switching, which I find very interesting because a lot of us do it and don't even know that we do it. I didn't even know code switching was a thing until I read an article.
Yeah.
I just thought I was adapting, but then when you told me I was bilingual, I like that better than code switching because putting that on an application, I am bilingual.
That's right. That's right. And bicultural, actually multicultural, right? We've learned to operate in America in a world where the power structure is very white, middle class Christian, right? And so we've learned how to operate in that cultural context because we have to, if we want to eat, pay the rent, mortgage, whatever, get ahead, keep a job. Unless you're, if you're an entrepreneur and you can do your own thing and you don't have to, good for you. You can, but for the vast majority of us, we do have to learn how to operate in those systems. And so, learning how to operate in a culture that is not your own makes you bicultural. And that's why I talk about my book title is The Culturally Competent Educator, because teachers need to not just operate in the culture of the school, right, in that white middle class normative, but they have to recognize the cultures of the children that come to them. And to be able to connect to them means that they have to respect and value the cultures that the children come with. So I'm working at not only children becoming bicultural or multicultural in that sense that they can move in and out of different cultural spaces seamlessly, but for teachers to be able to do the same thing, recognize, respect, and value the cultures of their children so that what those children bring to the classroom can be used to enrich their learning experience instead of telling them, no, your language is wrong. This isn't how we say that. No, you can't work with a partner. We are very Black folks, Latinos, most Asian cultures are very collaborative. We're communal, right? We'll work together to help all of us get better. But schools don't operate that way typically.
Mhm.
Everything is individual. Where does that come from? That didn't come from us, right? That is a very white Eurocentric perspective. Every man for themselves. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But that's not how the best organizations operate anymore. And it's not how we as people should operate. Individualism may have its place in space, but when it comes to learning, collective intelligence works a whole lot better than individuality.
I would agree. And you learn a lot too from the people around you. You learn a
Mm-hmm.
lot of your language from your family, where you spend a lot of your time.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were sitting here talking, one of the things that I can say that's universal, I think, for all Black people is that very famous
Mm.
hmm. It can be
Mm-hmm.
a it can be it can be But that
Yeah.
just that tone
Yeah.
says volumes, depending
Yes.
on the length, because you can draw it out. It can be short, like you have,
Yeah.
right? And you have, something like that. So
Bless your
that
heart.
to me is funny because that's universal.
It is. Um, like I said, born and raised in California, lived the vast majority of my life in California. My husband is from North Carolina, so we were as culturally diverse as two Black folks from the United States can be. And yet, all the time we stumble on these things that are exactly the same that our parents said that were the same, these expressions or the values, or it's like, how do we know that for people who are listening and not seeing all the silver stuff in the top of my head? I'm a child of the very, very early 60s. And so we didn't have social media. We didn't have mobile phones. God forbid you get on the phone and make a long distance phone call to one of your friends back then when calls were, you were charged for the minute and the distance of the call.
Right?
That would have resulted in a belt to behind. I'll put it that way, if you did something like that. So, how did we, so far apart, time and space, still have those same sayings, same syntax, same words? How does that happen? And it only happens because there is a unification of our culture that goes back centuries that we have not been taught in school, but has been carried through our culture.
I think that is so interesting. Yeah, another one I thought of too that you said was just the word girl and
Girl,
how you use girl. It says everything is so. Now that you say that, I'm going to start recognizing these things and telling everybody I am officially bilingual.
yes,
So,
you are.
if who who do you think, if you could pick your audience, like
Mhm.
who whose hands do you want to see have this book in their hands? Who?
I want every single person that touches the lives of children from PK through college, but particularly PK through 12, to not just grab the book, not just have it on their shelf, but to read it, to engage in book study. I do book study on my Patreon channel, but to really use it and understand it. I want teachers in colleges of education who are preparing teachers for the classroom to use it as a textbook so that they know how to connect and speak to the children in their classrooms, how to set their classrooms up to be welcoming and psychologically safe spaces for every single child that walks through the door. And I'm not just talking about Black children. Yes, I am a Black woman. Yes, my first concern is the damage that has been historically done to children who look like me, like mine. But we have horrific atrocities that have impacted our Indigenous American children that continue to impact our Native American Indigenous American children, our children who are Latino or Latinx, depending on what you prefer. Just like Black folks can't all be united in what we call ourselves, other populations are not either. In particular, are children who are Southeast Asian, because their experience has been very different from particularly Japanese and Chinese Americans who've been here much longer, and have sort of acculturated a little bit differently than those from Vietnam, our Hmong, Cambodian, and Lao children who came over as the result of what America did to their country in the Vietnam War, right? So very different populations and different experiences. But every teacher needs to be able to understand how to set their classrooms up to set all of those children up for success.
Wow, that is powerful. So if somebody wanted to connect with you, find out a little bit more about you, do you have a website?
I do have a website. I keep forgetting it is still there. I don't really use it, but I am at Almitra Berry across all social media platforms. I do the majority of my engagement on Blue Sky. It is a wonderful place for those in education. If you are not already there, I would strongly suggest get a Blue Sky handle and get on. Find me. I'm at Almitra Berry, and then Facebook at Almitra Berry. You can find me that way. And I am doing a book launch, virtual book launch on Facebook Live on September 27th September 27th. So,
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think it's such an interesting topic. We could actually talk about this all day because it's just interesting, especially when you start talking about language and all of those things that are really important. And so I thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Let me do my laundry list before I forget. If
sure.
you are an author and you want to share this platform, all you have to do is go to my podcast. At the top, you'll see a link that says, be a guest, click it, fill out the information. You will get the link to schedule yourself. You're on. If you are wanting to start your writing journey, even if it's by accident and you're not really sure, I have a 44-page guide on my website. It's free. Go download it, start your journey. If you're interested in supporting me, I have 2 books out there. Both of them are available on my website. Wait for it and You Sound White. You can get them wherever good books are sold, or I will ship them to you free. And I've got free goodies for you. And then lastly, if you are an author and you're looking to either pitch your book in front of a book club, or if you're a reader and you want to join a book club, Bright-Headed Publishing has one. It's called the IRS. We would love to read your book if you tell us about it, and we would love to have you join us if you are a reader. So that is my laundry list of things. Dr. Berry, thank you so much. Just one more thing. If you could give anybody advice on maybe how to help somebody who's having these types of cultural issues, whether it be a teacher, just anybody who's encountered this, what advice could you give us? Even as a parent, what would you say? How can we help our children?
Oh, I think the biggest piece of advice is stay involved and be aware. Um, it is going to happen. I hate to say that. I wish I could say everything's good and it's all going to get better. It is going to happen. Be there, get involved, make your voice heard. And if you need advice beyond that, just find me on Blue Sky and ask me a question. I have been there as a parent, as an educator, as a consultant. I believe it is my life's work, and that I have an obligation, a responsibility to continue to give back to the community in that regard. So reach out. I'm there.